Hey everyone, welcome to week 43. This is day 3. This is Wednesday. This is our suffering week, ongoing suffering, pure, utter suffering. This is Gouache and Chroma. And I think you guys have noticed by now that this is not easy for me. On Monday I painted Manu. On Tuesday I painted Sepa. And it's tough. You know, this is never going to be easy for me. But I'm going to give it another shot today and we'll see how it goes. Okay, let's get started. This is going to be day 3. This is our third day of our Gouache and Chroma week. And I've described these paints as Dani's, spare gouache set of paints. But for all the people that are asking, these are Himi, Miya jelly paints. I don't know exactly how much they differ between regular gouache and these kind of softer, and I guess the description is pretty good, jelly-ish feeling paints. They have to be different because gouache actually dries very, very quickly. It actually sets quite quickly, and you have to reactivate it by putting water on top of it. But these, I don't know if it's just the sheer volume of them, but they actually keep pretty fresh, throughout the painting session. And after a couple of days using them, they actually are very, very fresh still. Some colors, they dry a little bit faster than others. Maybe that has to do with the pigment. But what I do know is that they are different. I am kind of unsure of, their composition, because there has to be something in there that it's keeping them more open than regular gouache. I'm not sure what that would be, because acrylic gouache, that's something that stays open also, but that has acrylic in it, and acrylic can also set very, very quickly. And when it dries, you sort of feel that plasticky feeling that's inherent to acrylic. These, I don't know. I have no clue. And it has to be a filler, I would say, because these are cheaper paints. So they've found a really wonderful way to keep, chroma, to keep really high chroma. The handling is actually pretty nice, I would say. They do change in saturation. I mean, they become a little more desaturated once they dry. And obviously, they change their value once they dry also. But that's almost every water miscible paint. Acrylic does that, watercolor does that, and obviously gouache does that. So I'm not sure. I really don't know. I'll look into it, and maybe tomorrow I'll have a better answer for you guys. Or maybe some of you already know, and it'd be awesome if you know what's in them, and if you could just share that with us in the comments below. We haven't talked a lot about chroma, and I think that, to be honest, the fact that these are high chroma paints is not something that has bothered me so much. I am a painter, I would like to believe that I'm a painter, that when I see my starting variables, the set of variables that I have to start with when I'm going to begin to paint, I can recognize what my possibilities are very, very quickly. And as soon as I recognize them, I accept them. Let's say if I'm painting something with an earth palette, I know that I'm going to be painting with earthy colors. If I'm going to be painting with primary colors, I know that I'm going to have those 3 colors plus white. This may sound a little obvious, but it is surprising how frustrating a painting act can become when we don't accept those variables. So we yearn for saturation while working with an earth color palette, and we want a ton of hue possibilities when working with a very limited primary color palette. So instead of taking advantage of the possibilities that are available to us with a particular palette, what we do is we start complaining about it, and in our minds, we start wishing that it was something different. You would be surprised how many, many times that mindset is the one that is inhibiting us from experiencing the real value and the real range that the colors that we do choose to use could provide to us. So that's one example where, our materials are not the ones to blame, but we are the ones that are imposing parameters onto ourselves even before we begin to paint. So we have to be very conscious of that. So like I was saying, saturation in this palette is so obvious that when I see it, I mean, I'm scared of it because I usually don't use, one, so many colors, and two, so many colors that have high chroma. I usually have just accents of saturation in my palette. I try to balance my palette out, so I'll have more neutral colors in my palette, and I'll have here and there some accents in saturation, but I never pick a super saturated palette to begin with. A lot of people do that because if they want to use saturation, they know that they can achieve a very saturated hue right from the start. So every single hue that they have in their palette is going to be highly saturated. Again, that doesn't mean that the painting has to be a saturated painting, and we have to make that very, very clear. The fact that our starting point is saturated doesn't mean that we have to make a saturated painting. I'm trying to do that during this week, but I'm doing so just because I want to confront saturation, not because it is inevitable with this palette. No, we could actually go through some efforts. I mean, I was going to say great efforts, but not really. Some efforts into trying to cancel and gray out a lot of these colors. Obviously, we have earth tones that I haven't used that much, during the painting session. I think I've used the burnt umber or raw umber. I don't know which one is it. It's probably burnt umber. And I've used my yellow ochre a little bit, a tiny bit of that burnt sienna, but not really. But obviously, we could gray colors out with these natural earth tones, or we can just use complementaries to gray everything out. So it wouldn't be really hard to achieve a nice gray painting with this palette, but I'm trying to actually use the native saturation of the palette. The starting point, our starting pigments, are obviously highly, highly saturated. So I want to take advantage of that, and I want to do so because I also know that once my painting dries and it stabilizes, the color is actually going to tone down a little bit. So everything that seems kind of scary about the pigment is going to behave a little bit differently once it oxidizes and once it's absorbed by the surface I'm painting on. So I kind of know that, and maybe at the beginning it's a little bit jarring because I'm not used to working with saturation, but I also acknowledge that if you give it a little time, the painting actually sets, and in my eyes, it becomes a little more digestible. I can actually handle it a little bit more just for the fact that when it dries, the saturation and the value just lowers a little bit. So that part of painting hasn't been tough, I have to say. This year has been super helpful for me, and I'm very grateful to the act of painting in the sense that I'm not really scared so much of these colors as I think I would be. When I see them, still they feel foreign, but it doesn't mean that I'm super scared. As soon as I start working, I'm like, okay, these are the set of variables that I have, might as well use them. So I'm very happy that I'm letting myself sort of navigate those issues without me showing resistance. That has been pretty cool. The technical part of using water miscible paints, yeah, that's the toughest one for me. And I know we've painted 2 paintings, but that's still going to be very tough for me. It would probably take, I would say, months. I mean, it probably takes me a couple of paintings to get comfortable with something, but to really understand the paint and to try and take advantage of everything that paint has to offer, it would probably take me months, or I would say even years, to really try to shift and adjust what I know about painting and put that knowledge to good use in what would be, I would hope, nice gouache paintings. But for now, this is me confronting myself, my surface, my tools, my paints, and just trying to forge, very quickly a relationship that works. I think the way I paint still has to be far more organized. I'm really not an organized painter. I'm realizing that, and I think that that's coming to the surface, and it's very evident when I use gouache. I should be able to construct a painting in a far more orderly fashion, but I'm not. I jump around my painting a ton. Many, many times it's just a jumbled mess. And this is something that happens naturally when I paint with oils too. It takes a great effort for me to just land on one moment of a painting and then kind of solve that moment and just organically go somewhere else. No, as soon as I start developing one area, I see how that newly developed area is actually affecting another area, maybe another area that I just wasn't aware of, and actually then jump to that area and then work a little bit. And that area is going to show me somewhere else that I have to work on, and I jump to the other area. So honestly, my painting is just hopscotch. If I think about it, I have no clue how I've been able throughout the years to just finish a painting and make it look cohesive, because in my mind, again, it is a jumbled mess. But anyways, I think that was the nature of the painting yesterday. And for Spanish Tuesdays, for Martes de Español, I was saying yesterday how I just had to come to terms with that being part of my painting manner, and how instead of just being afraid of it, I just embraced it. Embracing it didn't make it less painful. It didn't make it less scary, but at least it made it predictable. Predictable in the sense that I knew what to expect. I knew it was coming. It just didn't appear out of the blue and sucker punched me. No, I knew that punch was coming, and I could just get ready for that blow. So it's not easy, but at least I was like, okay, this is going to feel weird. Let me just feel the weirdness and acknowledge the weirdness. And when I feel myself inside this very strange manner of painting, then I can kind of find my way slowly, because I'm trying to teach myself that when I'm caught in this situation that scares me, that scares the crap out of me, the best thing I can do is just have patience. You know, it's easy to have patience when things are like super mellow and easy, but it's very, very tough to have patience when we are caught in the middle of this anxiety-filled war with our paints and with our subject matter, and we have no idea how to find our way out. So those are the moments where we have to have a cool head and where patience has to come to our rescue. So I'm trying to teach myself that is something that I can slowly benefit from, that I can accept and realize that it is a tool. You know, it's an incredibly important part of my toolbox. I have to call upon it when I need it, and I have to be ready to answer to it. You know, I have to be ready to say, okay, I'm in the middle of this mess. I am going to be patient. Today's painting, I think it was a little more organic. You know, it kind of feels less trudgy. I think the first painting was tough. I think yesterday's was very, very tough. I mean, I consciously decided to break yesterday's painting apart because I knew that the single decisions that I was making in terms of color, I was hanging on, I was clinging on to those color shapes so much that I just wasn't able to configure form. You know, I wasn't seeing the forms that all these brush marks were supposedly constructing. So when I realized that it was kind of like a broken mess, I told myself, okay, break the painting apart and just put those little shapes of color down and just keep doing that in an orderly fashion. And eventually, if I was doing my job well, form would just appear. And this was wishful thinking. I mean, by hour 2, when I still wasn't able to see it, I had to tell myself constantly, don't worry, this will come. Don't worry, this will come. And I mean, it's tough when you work really hard and you don't see. But I guess I kept going, and it brought me to a place where the character of the painting was very brushy and it was very broken. There's not a lot of enclosed shapes. There's not a lot of areas where you can actually kind of round out the form, where you can actually tell where the limits of form are. But I guess that's the character that I was looking for in that painting, or that's the character that I think happened, and I accepted and I just went with it. So, you know, that's the way I navigate paintings sometimes. So I was very happy with that. But today's painting is actually behaving a little bit differently, I would say. It certainly has a more solid character, and it gave me a chance to have a more peaceful painting. I don't expect this to be, you know, true from now on. I'm sure tomorrow is going to be back to square one again. But for today, I was like, okay, I can kind of see this coming together. So that really helped. My North Star for these past couple of days, certainly yesterday and today, has been one of my favorites. I mean, I was going to say one of my favorite Polish painters, but when I think of Polish painting, I've told this story before, but initially I traveled there just to look at Jan Matejko, you know, bigger than life, just an extraordinary historical painter. And what I saw of Matejko when I went to Warsaw and Krakow and Poznan just blew my mind. I mean, it exceeded all my expectations. So he is that big of a genius. The idea of going to Poland to look for Matejko's work was also accompanied by this need to see a couple of paintings of Jacek Malczewski. And Malczewski is not quite a historical painter, it's more of a symbolist painter. And I mean, he's equally as huge and colossal, genius as Matejko. And Malczewski is the one that I've actually been having in my mind for these past couple of days. I've told this before, but when I left Poland, Olga Woznanska was the best painter that I saw in that trip, and she quickly became one of my favorite painters of all time. She actually obscured all the love and all the interest that I had for Matejko and Malczewski. I mean, I still love those two guys, but honestly, this is not even a fight. This is not even a fair fight. I mean, she can kick both their butts like so easily. To me, she was just the greatest surprise, and honestly, one of the most amazing surprises, I think, certainly art-wise, that I've ever had in my life. When I saw her work, I think it was first in the National Museum in Warsaw, but when I saw her work there for the first time, it's one of those moments that you know that your life has changed, and you know that you are experiencing something that has such a deep connection with you that you are never going to be the same. So she is not even in this competition. She's way above these two guys. I mean, these two guys are geniuses, Matejko and Malczewski. But again, you can't compete with Olga. I'm sorry. So these past couple of days, I've thought about Malczewski, and there's something amazing about Malczewski. Just his use of color. He is an expressionist. I mean, you can tell that he's had a kind of naturalist education. So he's very aware of the traditional manner of depicting form, but he's also open to this new way of understanding color and of certainly pushing chroma. A lot of his paintings are just so bold in the use of color, and he's able to maintain this kind of beautiful balance between using this saturated paint and interpreting form, and I guess that's the most important part, just interpreting form through these saturated colors, and yet still maintain this idea of a very plausible, natural universe. Yesterday's painting has that looser quality that he sometimes has in his sketches and studies. And today it's that acknowledgement of using that higher chroma palette that was very prevalent in a lot of his paintings. It is kind of like a love letter to him. I always say this. I always say that, all my paintings are love letters to all these people. And maybe they are, maybe I'm just happy to celebrate all these geniuses throughout history and just learn from them. It's so exciting to learn from such a wide and just different array of painters throughout time. It's incredible to be a painter. But anyways, this is just me thinking a lot about Malczewski and just using that courage that he had when handling color and trying to put that to good use. And also something that's super evident in his work is just charged with attitude. I mean, a lot of paintings were just so expressive that many times his figures are grotesque. I mean, a lot of the times his figures are fantastical, but many times they almost feel like a caricature. So you guys know this about me already, but I love that. I can totally embrace that. I feel completely comfortable with that. So I think that that's why Malczewski is certainly a painter that's very close to my heart and to what I love. And like I said, this week, it's tough. I think today there's a sense of calmness. I'm pretty sure it's calm before the storm type of thing. Tomorrow is probably going to be a disaster. But I think for today, at least, I was like, okay, I can kind of navigate this painting. I can kind of travel through this painting. Again, baby steps. This is not going to happen overnight. I know this about painting. I'm not scared of it. I even like this, but it doesn't make it any less painful. The suffering is real. So I'm pretty sure that tomorrow we're going to go back to messing everything up. But that's going to be tomorrow. So thank you guys for hanging out. Join us tomorrow for another effort in trying to understand these jelly paints, these gouache jelly paints, just a little bit more. We'll see how that goes. Thank you. Bye.